This is a 1999 Mercedes-Benz G500 Cabriolet. And like I mentioned yesterday on my main channel, it's my G500 Cabriolet, my radically overpriced Barbie Jeep. Now, a lot of you probably have some questions about this vehicle, like what would possess someone seemingly in their right mind to buy one of these? And today, I'm going to try to answer them. Let's dive right in. All right, now the first question you probably want the answer to is why? Why would someone buy this weird-looking, strange, convertible Mercedes G-Wagen? Especially because if you're a regular viewer, you probably know that I already have a ridiculously overpriced vehicle that serves this purpose. I have an open Land Rover Defender, which means I now have two convertible V8 two-door SUVs. So what's the reason? All right, so why? Well, like I just mentioned, I have this Land Rover Defender and I absolutely love it. It's a 1997 model. I've had it for almost 3 years and I just adore it. But it is not a very rational vehicle. For one thing, it has no real roof. There's a canvas top that you can put on, but it takes a minute or two, and it's just not a realistic situation. Now, having no roof wouldn't be such a big deal, except for the fact that it also has no climate control. It has an air conditioning system that is the most pathetic air conditioning system I have ever felt. You have to put your knee directly in front of the vent to feel anything. It also has no heat. It only has a heater for the windshield, not for the cabin, which is just incredible. Every car has heat. How does this thing not? But it doesn't. And the Defender's problems go beyond that. Safety is also a real concern in that vehicle. It feels like it's from a totally different era. You have no anti-lock brakes, you have no airbags, but beyond that, the construction is just ridiculous. It feels like it's gonna fall apart at any second. The doors weigh about as much as a lined note card. You just feel absolutely no safety in that thing at all. And my wife and I, we just got a puppy. We're thinking about having kids. And so riding around in that is not a realistic thing when you have an infant or a toddler if you want them to live. Then there's the problem with the Defender's performance. It just isn't fast. Now, I don't need my convertible SUV to be a fast vehicle, but the Defender is just really, really slow. With only about 180 horsepower, it's big, it's heavy. 0 to 60 is probably something like 11 or 12 seconds, and I just find it to be ponderous and a little bit difficult to drive on the road, especially on the highway, and keep up with traffic. It can cruise at 80 miles an hour, but it's a labor to do it. When I'm driving the Defender, I don't take phone calls, I don't do anything but sit there, look forward, and drive because it's slow, it's hard to pass people, and the safety aspect is kind of a concern. And as a result, the Defender has become a vehicle that I don't really take basically anywhere except in my local area within probably 5 or 10 or maybe 15 minutes of my house. But I love my Defender and I love the whole convertible off-roader thing, and I wanted some vehicle that refined and improved all those issues with the Defender but kept kind of the same general character and idea. Enter the convertible G-Wagen. The Defender has no roof. The G-Wagen has a power roof, as I showed you yesterday. The Defender has no climate control. Well, the climate control in this thing works beautifully. The air conditioning is unreal. The heat is fantastic, especially when coupled with the crazy heated seats. So you can be hot, cold, whatever in this thing. And of course, if you're too cold, even with the climate control on, you can just put up the roof, makes it way more usable. Next up, the Defender has no safety stuff. Well, the G-Wagen does. We have airbags in this thing, which is a vast improvement over the Defender. We have anti-lock brakes. We have maybe some semblance of crumple zones, since Mercedes refined and updated the G-Wagen over the years a lot more thoroughly than Land Rover updated the Defender. And another complaint, the Defender too slow for modern roads with its 180 horsepower and its 4-speed auto. Well, this thing has 300 horsepower and a 5-speed auto, and it keeps up with traffic absolutely beautifully, incredibly smooth to drive. That mitigates another Defender complaint. And the G500 Cabrio just has better features. For one thing, it has power windows. You push a button and they go down. It's like an epiphany compared to the Defender with its sliding windows that you can never get fully open unless you completely remove the top half of the door. The seats fold forward very easily to get in the back, whereas in the past, you had to climb over the fender in my Defender in order to get into the rear seats, which was not a realistic thing for older passengers to actually do. And one other benefit of the G Cabrio is it has cruise control. So not only is it easier to keep up with traffic, but once you're doing that, it can just keep going and you don't have to constantly be monitoring the pedal. Everything is just improvement. When I drove this vehicle, I was astonished at all these luxuries. I drive a lot of nice cars, but the idea of taking what the Defender has with the open roof and adding all this nice stuff, I was blown away. Now, I know what you're thinking already. Yeah, I get all that. I get why you'd want to improve the Defender, but you could have just bought a Jeep and it has almost all of that stuff. And I get that. But here's the thing. I like weird cars. If you saw that earlier video on my More Doug channel where I give you the garage tour, I'm like geeking out over my Saab 97X diecast model car. I just love weird cars. And as you know, I've had some success here on YouTube in the last 5 or 6 years. And when someone who's into weird cars gets some more money, they don't go out and buy an Aventador or a McLaren to show off. Instead, they just buy more expensive, weird cars. And that's exactly what this is. Yeah, I considered a Jeep, but it's just not as special, not as cool. The Wrangler has become so popular. This thing is just interesting more. It fits with my mantra of let's do something strange. Now, one item I do want to mention that maybe will be especially confusing, I'm not actually getting rid of my Land Rover Defender. Every time it's going to be in a video from now on, people are going to say, I thought you got rid of that. But no, I'm not. I love my Defender. It was my wedding getaway car. I took it to my honeymoon. It's been like my best friend for the last 3 years. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with it yet, since it's kind of redundant, but I do plan on keeping both this and the Defender. There's no point in selling the Defender. It just keeps going up in value. It's still special. I still love it, and I just kind of need to find a purpose for it. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that I said this was a 1999 model, but I also said the G-Wagen Cabriolet was never originally sold in North America. Now, if you know anything about USA import laws, you know that you can't actually import a car until it's 25 years old. So how am I here with this 20-year-old vehicle? Well, it's a great question, and it's one that I've gotten a lot, so I want to take the time to thoroughly explain it here. There is an exception to the 25-year rule, and it's if the car is imported and goes through a process called federalization in order to actually conform to USA standards at the time the vehicle was built. Now, there is an amazing and incredibly entertaining story about imported G-Wagons coming to the United States and being federalized by a company called Europa throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and still today. It's an amazing story, and it's one that I'm not going to tell here, but maybe in a future video. But the point is, this G-Wagon was also brought to the United States and federalized, not by Europa, by a different company, but still it happened. So this G-Wagen Cabriolet was brought here before it turned 25 years old, and all of the stuff that needed to be converted to make it USA legal was converted, and that way the car is basically what would have been a US spec G-Wagon convertible had they sold it here. So the speedometer is changed out and put into miles. The mirrors are changed out and it says objects in mirror are closer than they appear. The headlights have to be changed, the bumpers, various different items have to be updated. But once all that's done, it's as if this thing was a US legal G-Wagon in the first place. Now, it's worth noting that it is relatively easy to go through the federalization process with a G-Wagon because beginning in 2002, Mercedes-Benz did start selling the G500 here in the United States. And so you can pretty much order all those USA specific parts from a 2002 G-Wagon, stick them on this, and then you have a federalized and fully legal earlier G-Wagon, but one that isn't still 25 years old. So it's pretty doable for the G-Wagon. It's a lot harder for vehicles that were never sold in the United States because then there are no US conforming parts and you have to fabricate that stuff. But in this case, the hard work was done. The G-Wagon's ability to conform to US standards had already been taken care of, so you don't have to go through that whole process, which can cost deep into the $1 million range. But the process is actually a little bit more difficult than that, because I live in California, and California has its own import process beyond what the federal government has. So there are only 3 shops in the entire country that can federalize a vehicle that was not sold in the US to USA standards. There's a lot of regulations about it. Only 3 shops are able to do it. Only one of those shops is here in California, and only they are licensed to California-ize a vehicle to get it to meet California standards. Now, you don't have to do this. You can just have one imported, federalize it, and drive around with Montana plates or register it with some buddy in Arizona or Utah or whatever. But that's not me. I don't get into that stuff. I don't like to dodge taxes. I don't like to dodge regulations and requirements. If I'm gonna drive this thing, I want it to have a California plate and I want it to be legal, and then I never have to worry at Cars and Coffee. I never have to worry when a cop pulls me over. I don't have to think about any of that stuff. So I wanted a G500 Cabriolet that not only had been federalized for the USA, but also had been federalized for California. Now, as you can imagine, that made my search process tremendously more difficult. Federalizing a car into California is doable, but it's a process. It takes 6 to 7 months. It costs $10,000 to $15,000. And like I mentioned, there's only one shop that can do it. And so this truck went to that shop. It got all the California emissions equipment, passed California's tests, and now it's California legal. Now, it's worth noting, I did not actually do this. The dealership where I bought it from brought this car over almost a year ago, federalized it, did the California process, and then they offered it for sale, and then I bought it with all of the right California labels and decals and permissions in place for it to be registered here. Now, as you can imagine, the result of all this is that this truck is incredibly rare. Never sold here in North America, and it's California legal. So just how rare? I don't know the exact numbers, but I suspect there are maybe between 150 and 200 power top G-wagen cabriolets here in North America that have been imported and federalized. As for California legal trucks, I think that number is more like 5 to 10. Most people do not bother going through that extra process, complication, cost to get these things registered and legal in California, and so it is immensely, immensely rare. In fact, I was not actually looking to buy this truck when it came up for sale, but I've been watching the G-wagen cabriolet market for a while, and I've never seen another California legal one come up for sale. My wife and I wanted to hold off for a few more years until we actually had kids and wanted the safer vehicle, but it came up and I knew I wasn't gonna be able to find another one, especially in silver, which is the color I wanted, and so that's why I jumped on it. So that's the story. Incredibly rare, US legal, California legal, and that takes care of the how. So now on to the inevitable question everybody wants to know: how much? I don't love this question because to me, I don't buy cars like most normal people. I only really go after cars that aren't really going to lose value. They're special, they're rare, and they're not really depreciating. And so yes, the cars I've bought are all costly, but it's an asset that you can sell, unlike a McLaren or an Aventador, which drop in value like a stone, and then you just lose $100,000 or $150,000 the moment you start putting some miles on it. I cannot bring myself to buy cars in that manner, and that's why I have a Ford GT, which isn't going down in value, and I have this and my Defender, very expensive cars, but they're not depreciating. I am terrified to do it any other way, and so that's why I have a couple of fun special cars that are pretty expensive, but it's why my daily driver car is a 7-year-old station wagon with 85,000 miles that's worth like $33,000, because I just can't put a lot of money into a car I'm gonna drive a lot and then lose value in it. It just mentally, no matter how much you have, I just mentally, I can't do that. And so a lot of these YouTubers go off and buy a McLaren or a Aventador, and it's just, it's excess. To me, I cannot lose that kind of value in a car. And I always find it funny how people who dump money into car lease payments think that buying a car like this is spending a ton. I've had people who have brand new BMW 4 Series, oh, you spent $65,000 on your Defender, that's crazy, you wasted your money. Meanwhile, the Defender's gone up 15 grand in value since I bought it, and those people are out $20,000 in lease payments over 3 years. Now, obviously, if this goes up in value, it will not go up anywhere near like the stock market, especially when you factor in insurance and maintenance and repairs. But you can't drive the stock market, you only live once, so if you're gonna park your money somewhere, it makes some sense to do it in a car, at least that's not getting killed in value. But anyway, that's my financial lecture for the day, all to say I can't justify buying these cars if I really think it's spending money and losing value. So what does this thing cost? The answer is a lot. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. These are over $100,000, which is crazy when you think about what it is, a ridiculous 20-year-old ugly Mercedes-Benz SUV, but that is the going rate. The last public US sale of one of these was on Bring a Trailer, a 2002 model sold to Michael Strahan, actually, the football player turned talk show host. He spent $145,000 plus the Bring a Trailer commission, so $150,000 for a slightly newer version of mine with much better miles. I didn't spend anywhere near that on mine, but it was in that ballpark, $100,000 to $150,000. Now, if you're thinking that these things are only expensive because they were never sold in the USA and that once they become 25 years old, they're going to go down in value, it's worth noting you go on mobile.de, which is sort of the auto trader of Germany and of Europe, and this is what they're selling for in Europe too. The bulk of G-Wagen cabriolets in my body style range are going between 90 and 100,000 euros, which is like $100,000 to $110,000. And of course, then you have to factor in the import process, the conversion to California legal. Now, a lot of people will think this is an insane amount of money to spend for this thing, and I kind of agree, especially because a four-door 99 G-Wagen is like a $25,000 vehicle. But just like anything, rarity and scarcity drives value. People say to me, oh, I could have had for $125,000 a new G63 or a 2-year-old G63. And it's like, yeah, well, for $1 million, you could have 7 new Mercedes SLs, or you could have a 300 SL Gullwing. But special, rarer, older cars that were made in really small numbers, they tend to be more valuable, just like watches, jewelry, boats, planes, it doesn't matter. Now, of course, the G-Wagen Cabrio is no Mercedes Gullwing, but the idea is the same. And you may not really get it. You know, why would someone spend that? That's absurd, even though you know it's rare and unusual. That's crazy money. And I get it too. I mean, I don't understand. People are spending $80,000 on nice Integra Type Rs. It's crazy. People are spending $120,000 on Supras. I find that to be absurd. I don't get that. But that's where the market is, because they're scarce, they're special, they're rare. And the same thing applies to this. Just instead of a Mark IV Supra, replace it with a ugly 20-year-old convertible truck. But anyway, that's the story of the G500 Cabriolet. Now, because I am keeping my Defender, I now have 2 convertible SUVs. I am now the king of convertible SUVs, and I only now need a Murano Cross Cabriolet. No, just kidding. I'm not doing that.